Okay, so for today's lab, we're going to be reviewing hand washing techniques using glow germ as a way of seeing contamination. So to start, I'm going to shake up the glow germ and I'm going to apply a quarter-sized amount in my hand. And I'm going to rub it onto my hands well to fully coat them. I'm keeping my rings on for this lab because that is how I would normally go about my day-to-day life. All right. And now I'm going to I have a no wash station, a quick wash, and a good wash station. So I'm going to take my no wash specific pipette and I am going to transfer 3 milliliters of water into 2 test tubes that I have over here. And basically, I'm just doing everything the way that I would do it if I would be wearing gloves if I were completing a lab, but I'm doing everything the way that I normally would. Okay, I'm going to put that back in there. And now I'm going to turn off the lights, which is probably going to be a bit hard to see on camera, but I have a little UV light. I'm going to turn off the lights and check for contamination. So I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spots on the counter. And many spots, probably about 10 to 15 spots on my lab coat, maybe even more. So I'm counting these for the sake of my own lab experiment, so it's going to take a moment, but I have to count all of these. And it's also very clear that there is contamination all over my hands. It's on my wrists, my palms, especially within all the lines on my hands. It's all over my rings, underneath my fingernails, and on my cuticles. And I see 1 or 2 spots on this cup as well. I didn't touch the test tubes really or the cup itself, but there's probably contamination there. I also see some contamination on the light switch where I touched it. So now I am going to quickly wash my hands the way I might do if I were just coming home and wasn't paying super close attention. I get a paper towel, dry my hands, and turn the faucet off. Now I am going to use my quick wash pipette, and again I'm going to go ahead and transfer 3 milliliters into each of these quick wash test tubes. All right. And I'm now going to turn off the light again and re-examine everything. So I'm noticing at least 2 additional spots on the counter. There is contamination on the pipette that I used, as well as a spot on the rack itself. There are 3 new contamination spots on the counter and most notably all over my hands at the base of my wrists, still on my rings, all around my cuticles, and even on my palms. There is still glowing. Additionally, there's now contamination on the faucet handle. There's a spot on the faucet itself. And there's a large spot on the soap dispenser. So now I am going to wash my hands well using proper hand washing technique. I'm going to clean up the station and reset for one final good wash experiment. So this will take a few moments. I'm lathering the soap between my hands, rubbing it between my fingers, making sure to get my knuckles, paying careful attention to my thumbs as well. And I have a little scrubby I actually left over here that I will use to scrub my fingernails and cuticles with. And I will hold my hands downward as I rinse them off. Set my scrubber there. And I'm going to take a paper towel, and I will use this paper towel to turn off the faucet. Now I'm going to turn off the lights, examine everything, and wipe down my surface and workspace of all of the glowing contamination spots. So while I turned off the lights, I got the light switch. I'm also going to make sure that I get this little UV light itself. And as I'm looking at my hands, I see that after scrubbing, there's really no contamination left around my rings or cuticles, nor is there any on my wrists, which pretty prominently had contamination before the wash. So I'm just gonna use a damp paper towel to wipe off the faucet, the soap dispenser, the sink, and all of the contamination spots that I saw before. I'm not going to be using my no wash or quick wash stations anymore, so it's okay if I don't wipe those, I think. And lastly, I need to wipe off my lab apron and just try to get most of these spots off as well. Okay, so we're going to turn the lights back on now that all the contamination is gone. And now we're going to reapply the glow germ. Again, about a quarter size amount. And again, going to get it all in between my fingernails, or my fingers and underneath my fingernails. And based on the first trial, I know what to expect with what everything would look like contamination-wise right now. What I am going to do differently this time is I'm going to start with a good wash. And I'm going to use a paper towel to turn on the faucet and to pump the soap this time. Also, I'm making sure to stand away from the sink as I wash my hands, because as I saw with my lab coat, some of the contamination splashed up onto me. So again, getting in between my fingers, focusing on my knuckles, my fingertips, and my thumbs, making sure to get my wrists, and then using my scrubber for my fingernails. And I'm also going to use the scrubber on my rings where there was contamination before. All right. I'm going to rinse my hands with my fingers pointing downwards so that any contamination runs off of them. And then I am going to get paper towels and use them to thoroughly dry my hands and then to turn off the faucet. Now I'm going to turn off the light another time, but first I'm going to actually use this Good Wash pipette and transfer 3 milliliters of water into each of these. All right. Now I'm going to turn the light off and check for contamination. So already I'm noticing that I see very little contamination. I see just a couple spots on the counter, none on the beaker, and most importantly, there is no contamination on the pipette or the test tubes. There's also no contamination on the faucet or on the soap dispenser. And lastly, and most importantly, there is no contamination on my hands. So basically what we saw here is that when I reapplied the Glow Germ, some of it certainly, there were a couple spots where it got around. But then after I washed my hands and washed them well, all of the materials that I used, the pipettes, the test tubes, things that I would normally touch during a lab, they were not contaminated.